Hello guys, welcome to days 5, 6, and 7 of digital art. We are going to be drawing animals. You are obviously going to break up this video into 3 sections, and I will let you know when and where you should be stopping the video so that you can actually do what you need to do for these next 3 days. So let's go ahead and talk about animals. I am going to be focusing quite a bit today on, number 1, drawing using nice simple shapes to actually work out your animal to the best of your ability. Number 2, doing textures for fur and feathers and scales, aka reptiles. And then lastly, I'm going to be talking about adding some shading and highlights so that things look dimensional and really 3D. For this project, we are going sort of kind of realistic as you can get. In the past, we've done other projects during regular school years that include stylized pet portraits. This time we're just going realistic. So let's talk about these 3 pictures I have up here. Now, if you choose to do a furry animal, you're welcome to do any furry animal of your choosing. Same goes for any feathered animal or any reptile that you like. It is up to you to choose a good photo. What is a good photo? A good photo is one that has a decent resolution that either you have taken or you have found online and saved to your desktop appropriately. Make sure when you are saving photos off of the internet that you are not sharing and saving the thumbnail that shows up in Google Images, but rather the full resolution image. Once you have your photo, it is an option for you to click and drag it into Photoshop or Procreate or whatever it is that you're using. However, you can also draw without doing that step. I'm going to be showing you today a couple of things that you want to make sure not to do if you are going to be using the photo directly, because it's very easy to fall into a couple of traps of A, not setting up your document correctly, and B, attempting to trace the photo without very nice results. So I am working in Photoshop today as per usual. I'll try to fill you in with a couple of Procreate tips as we go. This that I have open right now is not filling my entire document because I went to File, New, and I opened a document that was the standard size we have been working in so far, which is 8.5 by 11 inches with a resolution of 200 or 300. You should be getting used to that by now. If I just click and drag the photo directly into the Photoshop icon or into an empty area, I will get this. And you say, that looks great, Machina, what's the problem? If I go up to image size here, it's going to tell me, sorry, I have 2 different screens, so I'm going to try to pull this over. Hopefully you can see it. It's going to tell me that this picture is actually 1200 pixels, which is 16 inches by 16 inches and a resolution of 72. So these numbers are going to be weird and crazy and change a lot depending on where you pulled this picture from the internet. Even if you pull it off your phone, the size is going to be super weird and strange, and you don't really know what's going to happen if you attempt to work directly on top of something like this. Now, this is okay. It's kind of big in size but low in resolution, so not the best thing ever. But this is better because at least I know what I'm doing. So make sure to open up a blank document first before you try to pull a picture in. If you pull a picture in and it's really, really teeny tiny, let's say I pulled my picture in and it's actually that's big. That's a low resolution picture. I can try pulling it larger, but it will probably end up looking really crunchy, and we don't really want that. Okay, step number 2 for using your photo is you want to turn down the opacity of the picture. So I am going to come over here to my layers and find the opacity and turn it down. So everything on this layer is going to be kind of soft and see-through. And then the next super important thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the layer so I don't draw on it by mistake. I just click this little tiny lock icon. I don't think that's an option you have available in Procreate, so you just have to be careful not to draw directly on the picture, because then you'll mess up the picture and then your reference will be kind of weird and you can't really erase and fix things. Remember that a really, really big important part of digital art is layers. So we're going to go ahead and click this little page icon down here a few times and make a bunch of blank layers. So my layer 1, or the one that's on top of my photo, I'm going to name it drawing. Layer 2 is going to be color blocking. Layer 3 is going to be texture. And layer 4 is going to be shadow. And then, I actually need a layer 5 that we're going to name light. Once you get to this step, save your document. I recommend that you save it with your name, maybe even the date, no spaces or weird characters or craziness. So that way, if you lose it, you can find it. And also that way, when you send it to me, I'll know by the document name whose it is and what version it is. Okay, so we have all these extra layers now. We want to obviously start on our drawing layer. Now, for those of you in Procreate, you're obviously going to choose a nice drawing tool. For those of you in Photoshop and Krita, you're going to make sure that you are working with black, and you are going to click on your brushes. You're going to make sure you choose one with a hard edge, and you probably only want shape dynamics on with pen pressure selected. I did that a little fast, but the whole point is that you want for your brush to have a hard edge with only shape dynamics checkmarked. It should look kind of like this. The other extremely important thing you're going to do is notice the size of this right now. Oh, I was not on my brush. I was setting the wrong tool. So one more time, hard edge, shape dynamics checkmarked, nothing else. Okay. So notice if I try to draw with this, that's a big fat line. I do not want to be drawing with super big fat lines. I want nice skinny lines so it feels like as if I'm actually using a pencil. So make sure that you use the brackets on the keyboard and make your brush real nice and small, real teeny tiny. Cool. Now we are not going to be zoomed in at this point, right? We want to still look at pretty much our whole page because a big important part of drawing is proportions. So where do these things go on the page? Where do I want for them to go specifically for myself? So the first thing I'm going to do is put in the shape of my cat's head, the entire head. Notice I'm not attempting to just trace my photo because I need to actually understand it, and to understand what I'm looking at to help me when I'm actually painting. It's super important that I just actually draw to figure it out. So for pretty much all furry animals, like bears and dogs and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have a muzzle, which is this area right here on the face. You see this right here? Boop. And notice that inside of here, we have the cute little cat mouth. Yeah. The cute little cat chin fits perfectly right there. And the cat nose. Now, there's a reason why we usually draw cat noses as triangles. You can see it right there. I just found the shape of everything that's pink. And then I can put the nostrils back in and make this shape something a little bit more complicated. Cool. Once we find the muzzle, we are then going to find the eyes. The eyes are very round and pretty far apart. If you put them too small or too close together, or a combination of both, your cat's going to look pretty derpy, and we do not want a derpy looking cat. Now this cat has some particular markings on it that I want to draw in because it will help me when I block in my colors, which I'll get to in a minute. So I'm drawing where this orange goes. I'm drawing where this black goes. Putting in the orange over here. Cool. I might also want to put in where the dots for the whiskers go, but not the whiskers themselves. That's always one of the very, very last things that we do. We do things like little baby details like whiskers. And then I probably also want to put in the darks in the eyes. Little highlights even. But notice I'm not tracing, I'm just trying to figure out where everything goes. Here's where the ears fit. Here's my other ear. Ooh, there's a little bit of orange up there. Okay, and now this part's very important. For cat bodies, we do not want to make them too skinny or small because then our cat will look really funny and goofy. So notice this is all the chest of my cat. This is just like the neck on the back. Notice I'm not giving my cat an actual neck, like a human neck. That would be strange. And here's this paw in the front here. Notice that those little actual paw bits overlap. So it's 1, 2, 3. Stacking the second one behind the first one and then the third one behind the second one. And then in my picture here, there's this shape, which I might want to make just straight across. You can change your photo a little bit, by the way. Let's say you want to put a flower crown on your cat. You can do that. You can have fun with it. Make it what you want for it to be. Then once again, I want to find some of these colored shapes. All right. So your drawing should get to the point where if you eyeballed off or trashed your photo, you have a pretty good drawing to go off of. We are not going to be super crazy attached to this drawing because on the layer on top, we're going to color block in all the colors that we need. Now, when you are color blocking, it is super important that you look at your photo. And I'm actually going to turn up the resolution on this all the way. I'm going to unlock it. Look at your photo, and instead of saying my cat has white areas with some orange bits and some black bits, I'm going to say, okay, what's kind of the shadow color, the kind of generic-y, slightly darker color in the white parts of this cat for this particular photo? And it's going to be this gray right here. Now, if I'm in Photoshop, I can press and hold the Alt or Option key on my keyboard and click, and I just picked up that color. Oh, cool. So now on my color blocking layer, I can make my brush bigger. I'm still going to stick with just a regular brush. And I can put in the majority of my cat with this color. Now, if I want to color pick again so that I have another version, I can do that. But I want to go a little bit darker than you think. So that's a little too light. Because on top of this, when we actually do the fur texture, our fur is going to be lighter. So we want to make sure that we have a dark enough base that everything doesn't get too bright and that we can still actually see the fur. Cool. So I'm putting on all these crazy blobs. Notice that the orange parts of my cat are actually brown. So I can put orange fur texture on top. And then the black parts of my cat are pretty much just black. Now, I'm rushing. You should be going a lot slower than this. Yes, it's going to look a little bit blobby and crazy. And that's okay. Okay. Now that I have that, and it looks crazy, I'm going to click and drag it so it's actually behind my drawing. And then on a layer behind all this stuff, I'm going to actually paint in the background. Now, you can just paint bucket a solid color if you like. It's also kind of fun to paint one. And because this is on a layer behind things, I don't have to worry. In fact, I can kind of like emphasize where the holes are. So that way I can go back to my color blocking layer and fill it in. So that's all. Cool. Having some green showing up inside of my cat isn't necessarily a bad thing. I can use that to my advantage. All right, So notice once again in our layers, we have our background, we have our color block, we have our actual drawing that we did by hand, and then on top of this, we're going to have our texture. Now, if you take a lot more time than I just did to do your drawing and color blocking in, it is a great time to trash your original reference photo. Okay. Now, since my blocking was really bad, we're going to leave that in there. Okay. The other thing you can also do is, let's say you're like, I really like my color block. I think that looks pretty cool. But my line drawing is a little messy. You can turn down the opacity of your line drawing so it's really soft and kind of like a light gray and kind of see through. Cool. All right, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to select all these layers using the Shift key and then press Command E on my keyboard to smash them all into one. Cool, right? You are free to do that if you'd like to. However, know that once you do that, you can't undo it, right? You can't separate out layers again later in the future. So might as well just keep all your layers as much as possible. Now let's talk about texture. This is where things get exciting and interesting. I'm going to use Z on my keyboard to zoom in and out. On the iPad, you can use 2 fingers so that you're closer to things and not super far out. For texture, specifically for furry animals, we want to use a brush that is set up in a very particular way, and we want to work back to front, just like we did with those landscapes. However, this time now we're stacking pieces of fur, so it's more like we're starting with the quote-unquote edges of our animal and working our way in towards the center. Now, this isn't like a hard and fast rule. Obviously, there are parts of furry animals that are not furry, aka the eyes and the nose and some other little things like that. So don't go too crazy, but let's go ahead and set up our brush. Now, for those of you in Procreate, you have less options for setting up a brush. If you can find something that looks kind of like grass, that will work really well. For those of you in Photoshop or Krita, I'm going to use this one that looks like dots. And you're probably like, why machine those are dots? Because if I turn off shape dynamics and I make it so that there's very little to no spacing, but I also turn on transfer, every time I click and drag with my stylus pen that I'm drawing with on my computer, it's going to make actual like hairs almost. Cool. Now, if I use one that does look like grass, I'm going to need to stamp, so more like just like singular clicking around, and I will need to change the angle that that stamp is going every once in a while so that the fur is actually going in the correct direction. So know that if you're going in a way that you have to stamp your fur over and over again, I'm going to try to find a good example. Okay, I could use this. You can see right here, right? If I wanted to stamp fur going this way, that's kind of nice, but then I have to change the angle of my brush using this thing in here so that it then faces in another direction, which can be kind of exhausting, but is an okay way to do it. So let me go back to this one. Once again, almost no spacing and only transfer on for what I want to do. This preview is a really good example of what you are looking for. This kind of nice swooshy of multiple lines, and that'll work really, really well. You're going to use the brackets on the keyboard to make your brush the size that you want. You can then start by color picking and adding some actual texture on the outside edges of your cat. Now, as you work your way in, you are probably going to go lighter from this color. So notice I actually like to keep my finger on the Option key on my keyboard. So I can click while pressing the Option key to pick up that color. So notice when I'm clicking in other places, I'm picking up the other colors. Ooh, cool, right? You should all know also how to do that in Procreate by now. So I'm picking up this color, but I want for it to be just a little bit lighter. I really like to have this set up in Photoshop where I can see this little color thing here on the side. So that way I can just move up a little bit lighter and add in some more hairs. And if I want to go even lighter or back darker, it's just a matter of moving it a little bit over here in that window. Ooh, you see, right? Now notice I am technically working my way forward. The edges between my cat's orange parts and black parts is fuzzy and soft. So I need to make everything fuzzy and soft, and I need to go through and do this all over the place. You're going to want to look at your reference photo a lot to help you out. Cool? Now you might be like, but Mishima, you're not looking at your reference photo. Well, I have it secretly over on another window that you can't see right now. So that way you can see what I'm doing, right? So if you have a printer and you want to print out your reference photo, or maybe you even have an actual photograph you're working off of, that can be really, really helpful and wonderful. You should be doing this on day 2, where you are going through and adding a lot of this texture everywhere. If you start doing this on your day 1 because you're really fast at drawing and you follow my setup really easily, that's totally cool, because this will take you a while. Notice I've only done this little part of this cat, and I would probably keep going. You got to do all of it, right? The ears, the nose, the cheeks, the body, the little paw, all of it is going to have this nice texture set up. And once again, the secret, the trick is getting your brush set up ahead of time to do this. My actual brush, if I were just to stamp it, would be a scattering of little dots. Right, you can see here, I'm going to make it really big and I'm going to make it an obnoxiously bright color. This is what my brush actually looks like if I just stamp it. It's literally just dots. Like, what? But because when I click and drag it, it actually ends up making lines. Okay. So that is what I want to say so far about actually doing furry animals. Let's go ahead and go on to our other ones. Now I'm going to go ahead and go through this process of drawing this bird. I'm going to do it really quickly once again. I'm just going to turn on the opacity, but if you would like to draw from scratch, please do. I think birds would be really, really fun for this project, especially if you like used Photoshop before and you're a little bit more comfortable with this. This would be a really, really great challenge for those of you that are a little more advanced. So once again, I'm on a new layer that I'm calling drawing. Whether or not I have a reference photo underneath it, I need to make sure that's on its own layer. That way I can move stuff around or change it or erase it and do the stuff I need to later. I'm going to find the overall shape of everything first. Really nice big shapes is always the key. I'm not trying to draw any details. I'm not contour line drawing either. I am sketching. So I'm telling myself while I'm doing this, oh, here's where the eye fits. It's pretty much a circle. Here's where that blue part fits. It looks like a raindrop. Here's where all of a sudden things get darker. Here's the line separating the top of the beak from the bottom of the beak, right? So I am thinking through all of these pieces that I'm doing and why am I drawing these pieces? They're going to help me later on when I am color blocking. This is a slightly different texture. This is a slightly different color. This is a slightly different color. Now, the way I draw might be a little different than the way you draw, and that is absolutely okay. That's kind of the whole point of art, is that everybody sees things a little differently. So don't think that you have to follow what I do exactly. Now, I think this is all I need for my sketch for me to feel good about color blocking, right? So once again, now I can pull out this picture back up to full saturation, really nice and bright. On the layer on top, we will color block. E for brush, I'm still using just a regular hard-edged brush for drawing and or painting, nothing fancy at all. I do not want to get distracted by all the other schmancy brushes and stuff going on. That's for when we start doing our texture. So I'm going to block in all of this green. I'm going to block in all of this. Oops, that's that's not the blue I want. Yeah, sometimes it's just easier to color pick it yourself. Blue. Almost black. Maybe this is more of like a dark gray. Okay. This is a nice kind of blue-gray. This is very dark, but with some grays in it again. There's some more blues. Notice that anytime I'm color picking using the option key and I'm like, ew, that is not what I want, I just actually select the color anyways. A lot of you, especially when you're in Procreate, aren't really in any of them. It's just sometimes a better result when you choose the color for yourself than just color picking it. Okay, let's go and put the drawing on top. Remember, I can turn on the opacity if I need to. Once again, for you guys, this should look a lot cleaner. Doing this part should take you like 30 minutes, not even kidding, okay? Long time. All right, so, oh, I almost forgot. We need a background. I don't like the color of this background, so let's pick something a lot brighter and more fun and interesting. So while we are doing more realistic pet portraits, that doesn't mean that they have to be boring, right? They should be really, really pretty and colorful and fun. All right. I have now smashed that all down together. Once again, that is not something you need to do. I'm just doing it to keep things organized for you guys. On a layer on top of this, I'm now going to actually start doing my feathers. Now, just like for our fur, we need to start with the feathers that are furthest away, so most likely on the edges, or the ones underneath, so lower down on the body, and then build other feathers on top of them. So let me actually take a real quick pause here. All right, we have our block in, and we're going to do our feathers. Now, just like I was talking about with your brushes for your fur, you can specifically find a brush that looks like a feather that you can stamp over and over again. And let's say you're like, Machina, I am not having any luck with that. Then what you can do is, at least in Photoshop, and I think maybe also in Krita, you can make your own brush, which is very cool. So I'm going to very quickly, for those of you that might be using Photoshop, show you how to do that. And so what I'm going to do is go File, New, and I want to just open a little tiny baby document that's only 2 by 2 inches. A little tiny baby document. And on this little tiny baby document, I am going to only paint with black what I want for my feather to look like. So I'm going to draw the some of it. I'm going to draw the feathers on one side. And obviously, if you're going to do this, take your time to make a really, really nice brush because you're going to be using it over and over again, right? And rushing, just like this video is 1,000,000 years long. Now, know that everything that I'm painting black is going to end up being whatever color I designate for it to be. So I want to make sure that this feather has a nice bright color to it, so I'm making it kind of solid, but still definitely a feather. I can also technically paint with white if I want to fix the edges and make it a really nice clean shape, or get rid of any little extra mistakes I might have made. All right, so there's my brush. Now, there's a very simple way to turn it into an actual brush that I'm using, and that is to go up to the Edit at the very, very top bar, and then go down to where it says Define Brush Preset. I'm going to click that. It's going to show me a little preview of my brush, and I can name it whatever I want, so I'll name it Feather, but honestly, the name isn't that important. What's important is the number here, 418. So I'm going to remember that just in case. Now, Notice because of the way I did this, I already have it as a brush, so I can actually close this document with a don't see. And I am back, by the way, over here. Notice at the top bar, I can switch between documents if I need to. I'm now carrying this brush. Now the color it's going to stamp is the color I have over here. So if I want for it to be red, I need to actually choose red. And then there we go. I have a feather stamp brush. Yay, cool. Something else super fun and exciting I want to show you is in your brush settings here, there is one called Color Dynamics. If I check mark it and click on the word Color Dynamics, I can mess with some of these little filter things over here, these little settings. And what it will do is every time I stamp, it'll make my brush magically a slightly different color. Isn't that crazy? That's cool. Now, I think that's maybe a little too much, so I would pull these down so that the color doesn't change way too much, and I'm still doing mostly all reds and pinks. So that can help a lot, or it can hurt you too, right? So be careful. And then the exact same thing I was talking about before, where you want to change the angle of the feather, it's going to be this option here. You can also make the spacing larger to make sure that you see the individual feather and not have multiple feathers stacked too close together. So there is a really cool example of how to do feathers. If you are struggling with this, you can't quite figure it out today, shoot me an email and I will try to help you as much as possible. Once again, this is something that's a little bit more limited to Photoshop than some of those other ones. So if you are going the more traditional route, you will be painting feathers, in which case then it is very important that you actually start painting with the feathers that are quote unquote underneath and then stacking the other ones on top. One of the last things you should be doing are things like the white highlight in the eye, because then you will need to switch your brush to something a little bit more basic, right? Remember this, our super basic brush? You'll switch back and you'll be like, okay, cool, that's exciting. And then you'll be like, uh-oh, I have to set up my brush all over again for those feathers. What was it? 418. And you'll have to go find it in here. And be like, where's 418? I don't know, I'm not sure. I've got a million brushes. So just be aware of that. Cool. All right, so that should help you out a little bit with feathers. Let's talk lastly about scales. Whoa, scared. Gonna zoom out again. Eyeball all these other things off that we don't want. Actually, I'm gonna smash these two layers together. All right, for this last one, we're turning down the opacity again. I'm gonna turn it way down so I'm not too distracted. And then with my brush, I'm going to find the big basic shapes first. I am not going to let the photo limit me, but rather help me figure out where things go. And if I want to change things, I can change them. So there's that. For this one, I'm not necessarily trying to find color variations. I'm trying to find scale size variations. So there's a bunch of really, really small ones in here, medium-sized ones here, a really large one there, this little ear right there. Yeah, it's an ear, it's not me. And then he's gonna have some little spikies, what I like to call chicky chickies, on his back. Cool. All right, now that I have that, I'm gonna turn the picture opacity back up again. And I'm going to, once again, this is drawing. This is color blocking, right? You know the drill by now. I'll probably time lapse through this. All right, so if what I was doing before for the fur and feathers is stressing you out and you're like, oh my God, Machina, I can't, okay, brush settings are scary and I don't get it, then I want for you to do reptiles with scales, because we're not going to even change our brush. We're going to leave it all the same, totally regular, hard edge, nothing schmancy at all, okay? Now that we have our drawing with the color block in, we are then going to make a new layer on top that we can call scales. And for this one, you just want to start with the larger scales and work your way to the smaller ones. There should be color variation inside of your scales, and remember that that base color that you have right here should be kind of a little bit of the darker version, so you can do a lighter scale on top. Cool? All right, so with my scale, like I said, I'm going to still use the exact same brush I was using for other things. And I am going to use the brackets on my keyboard to make it bigger and smaller. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to paint some scales, and I'm going to have some fun with the colors, color picking using the Option key. Put these scales exactly the way I want for them to be. Give them really nice, obvious edges. Now it's when you get in here that you can have some fun putting them really close together and making these nice little blobs. For something like this, you do want to zoom in. Now, if you mess this up, because the scales are on their own layer, you can easily erase and it not be a scary, horrible thing, right? Your colors underneath, your drawing underneath will all still be there. If you are not working on the right layer, stop right now, make a new layer, right? So that way, in case you do mess up and you go like this and you go, oops, just switch to your eraser. Notice I just pressed E on my keyboard. Oh, put my eraser set to a fuzzy edge. I want to make sure my eraser is also a totally regular brush, just like in my actual brush. So now I can erase, and everything's totally fine and cool. All right. Don't forget to change your color every once in a while. Don't use the exact same color for the entire thing. In fact, the more you change the color, the more interesting it can be. And once again, this is going to take you a long time, but it's going to end up looking super pretty. You can have lots of fun with it. Cool? So lots of scales. Now, for all of you, you hopefully want to get done with all of your texture by the end of day 2. If you didn't get there, then it's okay if you need to do a little bit on day 3, but try your best. That might mean that you technically have some quote-unquote homework, but you know, this is summer school, so enjoy it. Don't get too stressed out. Once you, I want to put in the background just like the other ones. And once again, for my background, if I think black is boring and I want for it to be dark blue, then make it what you want for it to be. All right, so I'm going to put in a dark blue background. And once you have everything set up to be the way that you want for it to be, you're going to make a new layer on top of everything, and we're going to call it shadow. Remember this when we're having this down here? Once you have your new layer named shadow, you are going to change the blending mode, the layer type, to something called multiply. Now you all have this and it's in slightly different places, but in Procreate, the little N next to the layer is an N meaning normal, and you want for that layer type to be changed to multiply. Here in Photoshop, you see where it says normal up here, you're going to change that to multiply. And in Krita, I think it's also somewhere right above the opacity that it says normal. You want to change that to say multiply. Now that we've all done that, we're going to make our brush a kind of middle range color. Nothing too dark, nothing too light. And we also want to make our brush fuzzy. So the easiest way to make our brush fuzzy is to choose a fuzzy edge and have transfer on, nothing else, okay? Once again, whatever way you get to the kind of brush that you're happy with is fine. Just take your time doing that. And I'm going to make it kind of big. I'm going to look at my photo reference, or I can even just make it up myself and say, where do I want shadows to be? I want for shadows to be here on this part of my lizard. And maybe I want some smaller ones. Use brackets to make my brush smaller. Above his eye, or in between his mouth, or inside of his ear. And I can paint the shadows wherever I want them to go. Because it's on its own layer, and it's set to multiply, it's going to apply the color darker to whatever's underneath. So I can then use my eraser again if I want to, and erase back into this if I want to make sure I can see all those scales or add highlights. Yeah. All right, so that was our shadow layer. It can help things look way more 3D and can be very, very cool. And now our other layer, our lighten layer. I made a new layer on top of everything. I named it light, and I am going to change this blending mode to, well, honestly, for all of you, it might be a little different. I like to start off with overlay, but you're welcome to change it to lighten or screen or color dodge. Speaking of which, you can change these layers later on. They don't have to stay multiplied forever. You can totally mess around with them until you get a type of blending result that you like. So I'm going to do overlay for now. And if I don't like the way it looks, I can change it. So I'm going to choose for the overlay stuff, for our highlights, you probably want not quite pure white, but a very nice light color. I'm going to once again use the brackets on my keyboard to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to paint. Oh, I'm on my eraser. I want them to be on the brush. And I'm painting the highlights on my lizard where I want for the highlights to be. And I think that looks really cool. Now, if you're doing this and you're like, ugh, I hate it, it looks gross, remember, you can change this. Now, as I scroll through these other ones, you see what it's doing? Whoa, crazy fun. You're welcome to try any type of blending mode you like. But I find that multiply and overlay are usually my most go-to ones that I use. If you ever watch YouTubers like Ross Draws, he likes to use color dodge. That's like his whole thing that he's really crazy about. So know that every artist has their own little tricks that they like to use. So that's day 3. That's your final wrap up. Make sure not to add your shadow and highlight until you're super, super happy with all the textures and everything you have in. You're also welcome to, at this point, make your background more exciting. So if you want to put in leaves or other textures, or you found a really, really cool brush that you didn't get the opportunity to use on your animal, then you're absolutely welcome to use it on your background. This should be really nice and detailed, and I do want for you guys to take time. So if you end up showing me this, or if you end up showing me this, I'm going to be like, whoa, you did not spend enough time on that. Once again, you're going for a level of like realism. So have some fun. Maybe even sit down in front of the TV or your laptop and listen to a podcast while you're working, especially on the repetitive texture stuff. And then you should end up with something really cool. Remember that when you are completely done with this project, you want to send me a JPEG, which is a file format that you saved out, JPEG. If you don't know how to do that, ask. Send that to me in an email. And of course, you can also just submit through Google Classroom as well. That's fine. All right, have fun, guys. And I can't wait to see what you do. Bye.